These alcohol swabs are something you can buy at any drugstore. And you get a box of about 100 for a couple of dollars. But they're great for cleaning off your set squares and so on. They really help. Another thing that you'd like to have is a thick piece of card. If you have, your walls are larger than mine, and in order to make perfect strokes with your marker, you need something that's going to absorb the ink. And this thickness of card absorbs up your ink so that it doesn't smear every time you reposition the card. My chaise is the focus, so I'm going to start there. I'll start with my lightest part, and I know now that I'm consulting my diagram, so that's A, and I'm looking at my chart, and A, I use the white of the paper, 1 and 3, and I've already determined that I want to move from dark to light. None of it is very dark, but I want to move from dark to light. So I'm going to wet the paper with the 10 at the front here, and just slowly move back. Now remember, your markers will respond to the weight of your hand. If you press, they go a little darker. If you don't, they will stay very light. So even if you're using a dark marker. So if you find that your markers look a little darker than what I'm doing here, it might be because you're pressing. The other thing I'm going to do to deviate from my plan is to put in a little bit dark over here where that cushion is resting. Down the front here, it's B, or it's our middle value, so I'm going to now switch to using my 3 and my 5. I'm going to put it mostly in 3 because my shades is not very dark at all. So what I like to see though is there's that dark accent, and then it rolls forward and catches the light. I can go right with my 5 underneath here just to set up my cushion, and you always go from outside in so that you get a feeling of the light hitting. It's not the same value everywhere. Even though it's all the same marker, you're hitting it several times in one spot and less in the other. That gives a little bit of variety as well. I'm going to use my 3, but remember I'm leaving that little gap if I can do it. And again, I'm moving from the outside in. So I could possibly get it a little bit darker one place than it is in the other, and I can do that as well with my 5. I can just throw in a little bit of that. Now this is shadows, so I've got to put that in a little darker with my 5. Okay, and then on the cushion itself, I'm going to go from the outer edge in. And I don't have that feeling of having to fill it all in. Now I'm going to leave a little gap again and go in here, just the way we did on some of our geometric shapes. And then I'm going to put a little accent here so that I can leave that gap again. And put some of my 5 at the top to roll this over. And see, I'm getting a little bit of reflected light in there. And then when I put this shadow underneath, wrong one, that's my darker one. When I put that underneath, the arm lifts up. This panel is facing, it's a 5, so I'm going to go in with my 30. I'll start where I know it's the darkest. And I don't just put one stroke, I'm putting a couple. And I can leave a little bit of a gap here if I can. It's bleeding pretty quickly, so I'm not getting much of a gap, but I could leave a little gap there, and that will help. My markers are kind of wet, so, but that's okay. You just let the markers and the paper do the work at some point. I've got this little section over here. It's turning away, so I'm going to use my 30. And I'm going to use a little 5, but I'm leaving the top plane light. This plane is going to be a middle value plane, and I want to leave the top light as I mentioned. So I'm going to start rolling this over with the 3. Then it gets light again. So I'm going to leave that like that. And I'll touch it with the 5 here to help roll it over. And if I don't like the look of that, I can just go in with my 3 again and soften it a little bit, just press a little bit. That's the beauty of marker paper. You don't have to worry, you can always. Now it rolls under and then over. Now the top, I'm just going to push that back a little bit with some 1 and a little bit of 3, and I'm leaving that gap. The tufted back part, I want to do the same thing. I've got to show that the top is light and the front rolls over. Before I start though, I've got this tufted button area that I can maybe touch up with a little bit of the 5. So I haven't used the 70 yet. This part is facing the light, but it's a roll. I can go in and see if I can try to roll this over. So if I just leave it like that, that might roll it over, and put a little bit of this. Every little spot, you have to think about what you're doing when it comes to working this out. What's rolling toward the light and what's rolling away from the light. And it's a lot of observation and doing sketches, constantly doing little sketches, and then this will become second nature to you. You won't have to worry. Then when you're done, you just go back, and I've got my 5 now. I want to put some little accents in. Some things got a little bit too light afterward, so I want to show this arm. I remember drawing it, it gave me so much trouble, so now I want to be faithful to it to make sure all that work was worthwhile. What's going to pop it is this shadow underneath. That should pop it. And the cross hatching is helping. It's there. I don't have to worry about what shape it's going to take or anything. It's all laid out for me. This is a light plane and it's a light carpet, so I can start with my lightest marker, my 1. I can start by bringing it out with that, and I don't have to render the whole thing. Remember, you don't have to render the whole thing. Then I'm just going to start inside with the 3 and bring it forward. And all of that texture that I placed, I don't want the shadow to sit on white. I want to blend it in a bit, so that's why this is being helpful. And maybe I'll just throw in a little bit, because I do have to see the parameter, and maybe the 5 is the edge, so put a little, there's shadow from my draperies, so I'm just constantly trying to get things to stand out. I don't want to make her the focus, so I'm just using the 3 now to put in a little bit of shadow on her. I determined in my drawing that I would just put a little down one side for her, and there's my hatching, so, and the underside, and we have the shadow that's going. So far now, I've only used a few markers, just the white, the white of the paper. This is in the light, so I don't want to go too dark here. Yeah, so far I've only used the 3, the 1, the 3, and the 5, and the white of the paper. The light is on in the room, so I don't really want to show what's going on outside. So I'm going to just take my 3. Now you're on a larger drawing, so what you might want to do is use that card to make perfect vertical strokes. It's not so important here, it's so small, it would just get in the way. But for larger areas, you want to use it. Not that you ever really, that helped to bring the sofa out a bit. And on this mullion, I'll see the shadow is a little darker because it's a painted surface, but the window, the cross-hatching is enough for the window part. And this will help to set up my figure and my chaise. Part of putting her there too will help to bring this out as well. Now this is up in the light, so what I might do there, I just put a little bit of shadow down at the bottom. Remember, we're trying to make things a little bit lighter in the center rather than at the edge. So this will help to get a feeling of the light hitting the center of that. And I want to get the same thing going on my wooden blinds here. So I'm going to start out from the edge with my 3. Start up from my edge. And it's a little bit lighter in the center, which I like. And I'm going to put my 5 in. And again, the 3 would be enough where it's window, and then the 5 where it's mullion. So I have 5 down here. See, so this is a little easier than the geometric shapes were. They were more difficult because you were trying to make them real. Here we're trying to just be graphic about it. And it's always okay to favor one side, even in a symmetrical situation, with more dark than the other side. And we'll let that dry now and see what happens.